Good morning.
You guys think I need to wash this hat?
It probably could go through a mild cleaning. When was the last time you washed it?
I don't think it's ever been washed.
Oh,
I forget that you can wash things besides clothes, like you can wash shoes, you can wash hats, you can do all these things, but it's just never occurred to me in my
in your
yeah,
career?
it's just never occurred to me.
Yeah, in your clothes washing career. Reed? So that has something.
Yeah. Speaking of washing clothes, I when we moved here to Chattanooga, I had to buy a washer dryer, and I bought this thing called a Speed Queen. It's a brand of washer dryers, and they're actually really nice. They're great, and there's no screens. You don't need an app. It's not like Wi-Fi connected. It's just it's like going to the laundromat basically. It's just like buttons, and it's like very mechanical and nice looking.
Does it ask you for coins?
No, I opted out of that attachment. But anyway, I saw my wife showed me a video of Martha Stewart doing her laundry, and she's like, I use these, and I'm just like, ever since then, I've just been thinking very highly of my laundry skills, because Martha Stewart lent her brand to this brand of laundry, and so maybe now now I'm thinking about it, I should just wash this hat. Yeah. So
long story short, probably washed. Ryan, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, it's good to be back, guys. I always love hanging with y'all on a Friday morning.
Talking about washing machines, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I tune in for Freight Gong Friday.
Of course.
Where are you, Ryan? Where are you right now?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia again. That's where I moved
Okay.
3 months ago and change right before I got married.
How is it? I was born in Richmond.
I think we did talk about that once upon a time. So, but that's a good reminder.
That's good, man. I need to get back there. I haven't been there in a long time.
Yeah, it continues to get better each year. It's also a cool little freight hub on the East Coast that many might overlook. And it looks like pretty soon, part of the Genlogs team, we have a few folks that are in the Richmond area. We're going to start working out of the Estes offices here as we start to do some work with them here too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Are you going to call your people forward deployed engineers?
I will be the de facto forward deployed CEO.
I absolutely love that title. Not because it's not real, but just because it's just such a good, it probably just makes you feel so good to say it. You know what I mean? You're just I'm a forward deployed engineer.
It's good. It made sense when you would have an Anduril engineer over in Afghanistan or something like that.
Right. Not some guy working on a chatbot in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I like it. No shade. No shade. Forward deployed CEO. That's a good title though. You should change to that.
Yeah, LinkedIn changing right now.
All right, good.
Brian, you said you mentioned something about you visiting the DOT headquarters. How'd that go recently?
Yeah, so happy to share as much as I can. About 2 weeks ago, got an email from some of the senior folks at DOT just saying hey, we are serious about combating some of the major issues that are happening in the industry and are looking for some partners on that. Some of those being hours of service violations that have resulted in some pretty horrific crashes as of late. The fraud and theft issue regarding double brokering, chameleon carriers, and then the B1 visa violations issue as well. So yesterday, a small team of us from Genlogs went in and had a meeting, kind of talk through what we do. That's less material than what the full conversation. I really dove into those topics. And my takeaway was, number one, the DOT folks that are here are actually locked in. And they were new down to the DOT level, some of the violations that were going on that they're tracking. So there's definitely not a blind eye being turned. There's some seriousness about, we know this is an issue. We've heard the industry loud and clear, and we legitimately want to address it. And so that was like number one takeaway. Number two is it was cool. Let's talk next steps. Let's figure out how to do this now, not 2-3 year arc from now. Let's get some funding from Congress. Let's, it was like, look, if you have evidence that there's violations or issues, let's start to investigate, make sure that the DOT investigators have the information they need to go start to clean up those areas. And let's like make this industry great again to an extent. I mean, that was the theme. Highly impressive folks that were from industry. In fact, like from a guy who came out of government, did almost 2 years in the intelligence, or 20 years in the intelligence community. I think a lot of us in the government came up through the government, were hired like right out of college and don't know any differently. And I think it's really easy to get bogged down bureaucratically. These folks I were meeting with, they were running large 3PLs or trucking companies until they got on the shoulder to come on in and start to function at the assistant secretary, deputy assistant secretary levels, and they struggle.
Are these recent hires at the DOT?
They are. So they're political appointees that were brought in by the administration, but they seem to deeply understand, like they've lived the problem. And I think that's always a really healthy thing, is when you've been on the receiving end of a stolen load due to double brokering or something like that, and the pain point, or you've had to like look in the eyes of, some family to say, hey, your husband or wife are not going to be coming home because they got in a car accident, or whatever it might be. Like, these are people that seem to have really lived the problem and viscerally feel it, and are like, let's actually address it, and let's go outside of like typical government channels to actually leverage best-in-class technology to bring it in to address this. So I will say, like, I've had a number of engagements since leaving the CIA in which I've dealt with government entities, and you don't always get people that are as locked in or seem to care as much. And I walked away yesterday being like, that is how government should work. Is
encouraging.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I truly, and I wouldn't say that lightly. I probably just wouldn't want to talk about it if it was a disappointing meeting. And yet it was quite the opposite. It was like a group of people that were like, we're fired up to actually address issues that have been going on way too long. And we are serious about it. We're going to commit dollars to it. We're going to do this. So anyway, we'll see how it progresses, but that was a little bit of a takeaway, and it was great.
You should try to convince some of those DOT people to talk maybe a little bit more publicly about some of this stuff, because I think hearing if more people heard what to the extent of things that you have heard, right, like how involved they are and how knowledgeable they are about some of these issues, I feel like that it would just generally be encouraging probably to hear for people, because sometimes maybe people think there really isn't somebody listening to them. Although recently that's probably picked up, that's changed from like FreightX and so forth. But
yeah, I've seen like Sean Duffy coming out a little bit more to chat about some of the things coming down. I think FMCSA Director Bars, I think, will be a little bit, I see him likely being a little bit more public. This was like the level right under Duffy. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that, like, if these conversations are ongoing and continuing, look, I think they should communicate, hey, this is what we are specifically doing. These are the good news stories where we have like investigated these, we've cracked down. I think that sends a message to the freight community, like, we're listening, we're doing. I think just as importantly, it's sending a message to the would-be violators that, look, your days of being able to operate with impunity are numbered. And we're going to be coming after, we're going to figure this out, and we're going to start to crack down. So I agree. If those conversations happen, I'll absolutely encourage them to hop on a Freight Gong Friday or, a FreightCaviar.
Honestly, it doesn't even have to be here. We'd be happy to give them a platform, but like anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you guys have created, like, I think even a long form letter and, like, the FreightCaviar newsletter, just kind of getting out hey, this is what we are doing to actively combat this. It is a message.
Shout out Danielle Chaffin, because she did at least a lot of like investigative reporting. I was just there to help, give her, a voice, beyond that, we did some stuff too. So,
what is a world without having to worry about all this stuff look like?
It's funny. I was thinking about that. Fortunately, Genlogs has not built our entire existence on like, hey, we're committing fraud and theft. And like, it's always, you're going to need to chase the long tail of the market on the carrier side. So, but there are some that like, that is their entire business line.
Right.
Is, hey, there's theft is an issue, fraud's an issue. We're going to help combat that. And if you actually roll that up and the DOT does that and does it pretty well, and all of a sudden there isn't those loopholes that people are exploiting to get it done, I think it's a better freight market. I think there's a few startups and VCs that'll be a little disappointed.
Sure.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at. I mean, it's been such like a hot topic for, years now. And I just wonder, if this gets, maybe it'll never be solved, quote unquote, but like, if it's much, much harder, then like, what are people going to focus on and talk about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like all anyone talks about for good reason. But I just like,
it will change once the DOT starts to really vocally pay attention. It's like noticeable actions that are taking. And I think that will just start to.
I mean, what does solved even mean? Does it mean, it basically just means illegitimate actors can't get authority. They can't, like the whole stealing of identity isn't a thing. Like you have airtight, you know exactly who you're dealing with whenever you book a load with somebody. I mean, I guess that's what it means.
Ryan, do you think it should be almost as strict as like, well, not an everyday person can just go in and buy an airliner and become an airline, for example, right? Like I don't think so. I mean, you can buy a small plane and operate in certain like zones, from what I understand, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think there needs to be, I've been really thinking about this a lot over the years. The 2 years that I've been in freight. So my long illustrious career with y'all. And yet I think there needs to be something that does a better job of bridging the digital to physical divide. And so you can say a lot, you can enroll a lot, you can do a lot digitally. And then like what is happening physically should reflect that. That's part of the fraud story that I think we've started to learn, is that with our sensors out in the roads monitoring what is physically happening, it really becomes clear that sometimes the physical footprint absolutely is not matching what the digital desire is potentially, or vice versa. But I do see there being a world in which, if you actually think about right now, anyone could go out and lease and grab a truck, and truly there's no way at that moment in like point in time to know who's behind the wheel of that truck. What are they legally able to be doing that? Should they be there? Like you don't know. You might know that the truck is legally leased, and it's legally leased to a DOT that appears on the side. But as we've seen recently with the impersonations, which I'm happy to get in a little bit more of that, we're seeing a spike in carriers impersonating other carriers on the roads. And so I think like drilling down one level further on that is what is ultimately going to be needed. So some almost like in the way that Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency kind of has this concept of a blockchain and a ledger, that, hey, there's immutable, that transaction occurred and everyone can see it. I think a similar view of like that truck is the only one truck that could be matched to that DOT at a time and place, and that matches the digital record. Now, what I'm not advocating for is that everyone has to share their ELDs with Big Brother, and therefore, like always, that the government knows everywhere where every truck is at all times. Like, I think there's a way to address fraud systematically without eroding privacy to a great extent. So that's where like I'm driving towards. I think that's where the industry needs to get. I think that's where I think DOT can start to drive down there, where I think a great example is you don't know that who the pilot is necessarily of a plane that's in the sky, and yet ATC knows that plane should be in the sky at that time and place. And like, if that is not the case, then alarm bells are going to start going off that something is amiss. I mean, that was like 9/11, post 9/11 protocols of this plane is unresponsive and trending towards Washington, D.C. We have a problem. And kind of how do you do that in a way that everyone's passenger data that's on that plane isn't publicly put out there, that Christian or Reed or, are on that plane and traveling. That's where I'd like to see us get to.
Be crazy if we start dispatching fighter jets, when the truck goes loose.
Oh man.
Yeah, that could be cool.
Well, speaking of jets, in Chicago, at eyesight on my apartment on the 27th floor, there's fighter jets flying as low as my eyesight.
It's the water show or whatever, the air show or something like that.
Yeah,
it's cool.
It's really crazy, but that's speaking of which, do you think, Ryan, if things get to the point where the ELD data itself is no longer helpful in the way that it's been helpful for much of the broader industry outside of government compliance?
Well, I think it's a big open question for me when the market gets tight again and capacity is difficult to find. How many carriers will say, you know what, I just would prefer to have my own data. Thank you very much. And pull that back from any of the sites that they've given permissions to. I think it's a little bit convoluted now. I know Danielle's watching and she's kind of posted on this before too, about the fine print on giving access to your ELDs and how much are you actually doing. Maybe it's not just on the tracking the load, but if it's persistent, given how some of that's configured, it's really difficult to figure out how to roll that back. But there will be tutorials on it. People will be if they want to take their data back and not have it just be out there collected and used, and I know there's a perception it could be used against them. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think on the whole, it potentially helps carriers get filled and eliminate some backhaul miles that they otherwise, due to inefficiencies on load boards and some of the issues there, might be closed. But that's my open question is, if tomorrow capacity got real tight, how many of the current carriers and new entrants in the markets would be you know what, I'm not going to click that button and give you access?
Yeah, they'll have much more leverage. They're just doing it now because they have to. They don't have any leverage.
Yeah.
In freight. And if they want to work with somebody and they're saying they have to do it, then they're probably going to do it. And
most carriers just don't have any outbound, all carriers, except for the larger ones, all small carriers around less than 40 trucks. They have no outbound sales for the most part whatsoever. And so they're just a benefit of sharing that information is that the sales or the demand can come and find you effectively, right? And that's more or less also
in a perfect world, I'm not sure that's, I guess I've been out of the game for a little bit, but
that's effectively with Genlogs is obviously more so camera, observations, which is still providing that same value to the carriers. At the end of the day, it's hey, if you're running that lane and somebody needs it, you're more likely to get reached out to, which is great for the carriers.
What, Ryan, can you guys infer hours of service based on breadcrumbs of how long a truck's been on the road for a day?
So the answer is yes. And this came up in the DOT meeting yesterday. And I just told them, I want to be really clear. Since we are not collecting the drivers, I don't know when that truck has team drivers or not. And so there is no world in which we are going to systematically just be these are violations.
Yeah.
I think I've shown a great example. In fact, if you guys want to see, I'm happy to share this one set of slides here where we watched, let me pull it up for you guys. We watched essentially a carrier, and I was going to mask who this carrier was, but I'm just going to go ahead and share it anyways, because it actually happens on the road. But let me caveat it to say, I don't know if these guys had team drivers or not, but it's an example of kind of showing you over a 4-day period, watching this one truck, 526, back in March. This is when we kind of saw it in the data. Started out 9 a.m. on March 18th in Bentleyville, Pennsylvania. And then we saw them a few hours later, end of the day, State Line, Indiana on the 18th. 2 days later, we see them in Yucca, Arizona. But then this is really where it gets a little bit hairy is they get all the way to California. So they're in Hesperia, California. They turn around. That's on the 20th. The next afternoon, they're in Shamrock, Texas. And then the very next afternoon, they're all the way in Amberson, Pennsylvania. So that was 70 hours of driving here, 4,830 miles in like 4 days.
Damn, this guy's hustling.
He's hustling, exactly. And what's interesting is in a 3-month period, there was 0 inspections on this truck. We had seen them a number of times, and when we added up all of the mileage there, the mileage came to 25,641 miles on just what we observed out there. So like the distances between our observations over that 3-month period. That's interesting because in 2024, this carrier was claiming that all of last year, their 7 power units did a combined 23,000 miles. And in 1 quarter, one of their trucks did over 25,000 miles. So that's an example where we could at least flag to be like, hey, are they team driving? What's going on here? And
or
at least
strong solo surrogate.
Say that again.
Or do we have a strong solo surrogate?
Yeah, exactly. Or do we have a strong solo surrogate? So like that I would say, like, could we put some dots on a map and tell you, hey, you can't get between here and here within what hours of service limits are? Yes. Can I conclusively say this is an issue and a safety violation? No, because they absolutely could be team driving. And we've actually developed some capabilities to now decipher which trucks are team driver capable, so to say. That's a model that we've already built. We're rolling that out in our platform soon. But if you can imagine a future world in which at least we're saying, hey, you could take a look at this, but if they're team driving, check it off and go down to find someone who's maybe violating, like the Hope Trans LLC case, where we could have seen, hey, that there's multiple violations happening. And when they were stopped at a inspection, they only had a solo driver. And then you could you go back in time and be like, well, hold on, you can't solo drive where you were and actually hit it. There's some ELD manipulation must be going on. But the ground truth record of what Genlog sees can't lie.
Have you observed what an average amount of inspections are per one inspection, the average miles driven per truck?
So
I guess that would be, would that be better per truck or per US DOT number? Or
we're looking at it, shaving it always, kind of looking at the ratios between number of inspections versus number of miles we observe, or number of miles like reported by the carrier. Part of that is actually to help carriers. So I don't have it right now, but I could pull it up. I was talking with Lucky Dog, was a carrier out there that they have been in business for 8 years. They are doing about 80,000 miles a year on their fleet. And yet their out of service scores are still like 0 across the board, 0 out of service on driver, 0 vehicle. And that's significant because there's a lot of the carriers out there that are 0, but they're new entrants to the market and they've never been inspected. And so that's like a really inefficient way to truly compare 2 carriers if all you're looking at out of service scores. And I know there's people watching this that are probably nodding, vehemently here saying, yeah, because if, let's say, Hope Trans LLC, for example, the involved in the crash in Texas, June 28th, if they buy a new MC, start a new MC, and roll the trucks over there, that DOT will have a 0, like driver and vehicle out of service inspection, because it's, brand new,
right,
squeaky clean. And so we're looking at, okay, how do we actually look at miles driven on the road observed through Genlogs compared to number of inspections, compared to out of service, to get a better comparison of what truly a good carrier looks like. And so we're actually building that now. And I think long-term, this could be almost supplant out of service or some of the ISS and basic scores as a better measure of what safe and secure looks like on the road.
Yeah, I mean, you guys just have way more interesting information than basically everyone else.
You pick up new information, which obviously didn't exist prior to you guys, making it available. Now new possibilities will be completely.
And Ryan, when I first when we first met and you told me what you guys were doing, my brain initially jumped into, okay, what does this look like, in 10 years when you all see basically everything or as close to everything as you can? Like what are the ramifications of that for the industry? And to me, it's like brokerages especially kind of compete on how clear their picture of the carrier landscape is, right? And so big brokerages have this mountains of data. They know, all the, we've got X amount of carriers that have hauled these lanes for us. We think we leverage that data to source capacity at or below market rates because we know where people run. And now all of a sudden where everyone runs much better than any individual actor, and you can give that data to anybody who subscribes. It's like, what is the competitive advantage in sourcing capacity anymore? And like, what does that mean for like just the way the market functions and like the way it's a very interesting question to me. I don't know if you probably thought about it a little bit, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, I've thought about it a lot, and I think what excites me is that once TQL no longer has an advantage over the two-person brokerage, because it doesn't matter if you have a 2,000 carrier sales reps or two, you have access to the similar data. Now you're competing on service. You're competing on like your customer service to your customer and how you treat your carriers. And that starts to become the true marker of how successful you're going to be in the business. It's not how much resources you're throwing at people to call lists of carriers. And it's so funny, Reed. I literally quote to whether it's investors or others. I think it was on like Everything is Logistics podcast that you were on like 2 years ago, where you said, my early days being a carrier sales rep, I literally picked up the phone and I would ask 4 basic questions every day.
Yeah.
Hey, how many trucks do you have? What are your lanes? What type of equipment? Where are your trucks today? And I said, we want to eliminate those questions so that now you just know those answers so you could develop those relationships with those carriers.
Yeah.
And a foot stomp on like, I don't believe that everything should be like fully automated, fully AI. I think that would be a really sad industry to be a part of, where you never get to talk with some of the awesome drivers that are out there on the roads and develop those relationships. But we want to get you to who you should be chatting with quicker so you don't have to make those calls to lists. But if I can do that now and a TQL or other buys that service from Genlogs, that means by extension, we have more data, or they're trying to not invest all of that in just having people call. I can now put that in a two-person brokerage's hands, and they truly can compete there, saying, hey, we can now see the long tail of the market. We have great carrier relationships, and go to that same customer with a similar tech stack and say, cool, like let's actually compete on who's going to actually have the best relationships with those carriers, incentivize them to be on time in full. That's where I think this pushes the industry.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I just like am trying to wrap my head around what this means for just like the general structure of the industry. You know what I mean? Like, is in 10 or 15 or 20 years, like, is there, I don't know how many brokerages there are, what, like 20, 30,000, something like that. I'm just making up a number.
It's about
like,
20,000.
Is that still the case? Or is there significant advantages to scale, or is there advantages to, or is the market going to be more right for kind of a decentralization? I don't really know.
Ryan, let me pose the question to you this way, because I'm actually curious. I asked this question recently to a couple people. To Reed's point, do you see more fragmentation? Do you see more consolidation? Or do you actually see it end up being the same distribution that we currently see today? It's just that ultimately the total volume of freight being moved across the industry is just growing at a steady state that maybe, has been growing. It's been growing for the last, maybe prior to COVID, it's been growing at about like 3%, I think, year over year. How do you see it? Like, I can see it in either direction, or either of those three options.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see is the rise of the agent model more. So I don't know whether that means there's more fragmentation from who carries the MC and then how many, but who's working on there. But I think the agent model is going to take off a little bit more here. I think that's true because technology like Genlogs and like some of the agentic AI and others out there, or Shipper CRM, like you literally could have Genlog, Shipper CRM, and an agentic AI like Copilot in here and truly see who are all the shippers out there, the potential customers, who are all the carriers that run those lanes for it. And as like a one-man shop, make a very decent living here and do so nestled under someone else's back office and MC number. And so it's been interesting. A lot of the recent inbound we've been receiving at Genlogs, and we're not quite sure yet, in all fairness, how to handle it, has been agents from larger brokerages coming to us say like, hey, how do I get like a single seat to you guys? And we're like, well, we kind of sell to entities. So can we get the brokerage involved? And they're like, well, my brokerage, they provide me X, Y, and Z on the back office side. But the tools that I need to go do it, I need to figure out how to get it. And you guys have something I want. And I think the more that someone fresh out of college can buy a certain tech stack for $10,000 a year, like that's the only upfront investment. And then they can make $200,000 a year because AI is carrying the weight on a lot of the outreach and initial comms. Now they just have to develop great relationships. So I don't know if that means you get like 6 really big brokerages that are agent models and everyone's underneath of them, or do you get 6,000 brokerages that are smaller with agent models? But I predict more of a rise in the agent model. And I think we've seen a few announcements in the industry recently where a brokerage that's classic, maybe Chicago style brokerage is all of a sudden opening up a secondary brokerage that's agent style. And I think that's why.
Yeah, we've seen the same kind of request at Shipper CRM where an individual agent at one of these companies, they come in, they say, I want to buy it. But there's also the barrier to entry, which you could argue is maybe a good one, because if you can't find an investment to start a business, to support starting a business in this industry, then potentially that's a good thing. You could argue, I could see an argument for that. But then again, a lot of these agents would come in and they would ask like, hey, can you maybe try to see if like corporate could go in and get, could buy me a license. And what we ended up finding was that corporation, like the corporate entity of the agency would go in and they would actually start to use Shipper CRM as an incentive to recruit agents, which was a pattern that we observed pretty quickly. And so we built, like, billing becomes a nightmare in that sense, actually, if you don't build for it from day one, because everybody wants to kind of use it every agent wants to use something slightly different, the tool in a slightly different way. But I would largely agree. The agent model, it's like brand. The agency is going to be a brand. It's going to be like support resources for all these.
Well, I don't have as much of a dog in this fight as you all do. But I can probably maybe ask more pointed questions about like what the state of the brokerage market even looks like, or is it even necessary? Like I just think about like, if you know where all of the supply is, because brokerages are just mini marketplaces, right? That's all they are. They're just matching supply and demand. And yeah, they service great, communication, great, back office, great, all that stuff, fine. But like, if you know where all the supply is, which Genlogs is going to, supply of capacity, I mean, you could argue, maybe that's demand for freight, whatever. If you know where all the trucks are and you know everything they do, you know perfectly their area of operation, what kind of they have, all these things, are they legitimate? Great. You have all that. And then like you're able to aggregate all of the freight, which eventually shippers are going to be like, it's going to be so obvious that using this is better. And you're going to have a clear picture. There's going to be better service, better execution. Carriers are more happy working with people who use this stuff. Like, I just think naturally over time, it's just going to make, I don't know why the middleman is as required. I just don't, I don't, or they're just going to get really, really, really skinny. because
the one argument is like that brokers, you get one way to look at it them is that they are this mini marketplace as you kind of described it, but then the other way is and this wasn't, I didn't coin this term, I heard it somewhere, which was that brokers are the risk managers for the most part.
sure, and that all makes sense
per se, in my view.
Well, it's just part of it. It's just part of the value they bring to the transaction, right? When you're dealing with a shipper that has never moved freight before, and they're good at making widgets, but they don't know anything about the black box that is transportation, it makes total sense to have a professional who does it for a living handle it for you, because they know all the thorny or the jagged edges of the marketplace. That makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense. They protect you from fraud. They protect you from all the crap you don't want to deal with. They protect you. They do all the scheduling at all your end customers, which is often a pain in the ass. They know how to interface with carriers, which can be a pain in the ass. But like, as you start to remove those things and it becomes more kind of commoditized to be able to do that, or it becomes easier, or the transaction cost, so to speak, and the friction is removed, the question is just like, what does that actually mean for like, is there a world where a shipper can feasibly, because they know all the supply, they know all the carriers, and they know all the carriers are legitimate. Yeah, like, does that just completely change the game? And is that a good thing? I don't know. But I just can't help but think about it,
Yeah, I think to an extent, Christian's right, and I know you agree, Reed. Like, there's the risk management piece. I think it's the reason that, like, despite us being a decade after Zillow exists, realtors are still crushing it and making and people still use realtors, even though they can see the market,
the
capacity. They could go use like LegalZoom and create a bill of sale or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
It's, there's, let me, I'll share, we're doing like,
God forbid you use LegalZoom, by the way.
Say that again.
God forbid you use LegalZoom.
Yeah. By the way. I know. Well, I posted about this the other day, this $1.6 million load that was stolen.
Sorry, Ryan, hold on one second. Okay.
There you go. And, at the end of the day, this $1.6 million load was stolen. Spoke to the shipper. We kind of like both looked in. We're looking at our platform, like there's the pickup. That's where the carrier should be. And at the end of the call, they were like, yeah, this is clear as day. Like the broker should have never have used that carrier if they've never been on the West Coast. And I just kind of asked, I was like, hey, how much freight do you guys use, like exclusively brokers? You guys handle any transportation in-house? They are 100%. They broker all their freight. So they don't have any direct relationships with carriers, all broker. And I was like, well, would you like to at least see like who's running? And we literally ran, the load was actually from Los Angeles up to Las Vegas. So not too long. We looked up in our platform, there's like 700 carriers, 100 plus of them based in the Las Vegas area. Would have been like an easy backhaul. They could have sourced it themselves. And I just asked like, hey, would you guys consider doing that? And he thought for a second. He was like, nope, we're just going to continue to use brokers because like, then we don't have to think about it. And we don't mind paying that margin, but ... we are probably going to do a better job of asking what is the broker's tech stack to know that like, they're going to protect against this. They're finding the right capacity. Like, how do they do it? Cause he was like, if those mofos just turned around and posted on DAT and that's all they did, then what value are they to us? And I think that is like, was the interesting takeaway for me, was kind of the, hey, if that's all you're going to do is just post, like a monkey could do that. Show me what else you guys do that actually keeps my freight safe, keeps the cost down and get it there. So there's going to be some shippers out there, and we've seen it. Like when a shipper will reach out to me and I look at their LinkedIn profile and like they used to be at Coyote, like they were a broker. And so they know how to do this and they're now working at whatever big shipper it is. And then there's going to be others that are like, look, that's just not what we do. And we are willing to pay someone else to do it, but they better do it in a way that like, I never have to get a call that says, hey, we're really sorry, but your load got stolen. Like
it is Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question that's a crazy question. And I feel like I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Did you ever consider that the proper structure for Genlogs would be to actually just operate a brokerage?
How many times have you been asked that question, Ryan?
I every VC asks me, which is shocking given like the post Convoy era, that people still are like, well, why wouldn't you just be a brokerage? And Craig Fuller actually posted this the other day, similarly saying like, there's no way in hell he would be a brokerage. He like sees the pain that they go through. I would say similarly, like when we actually spend time with our customers and watch like everything that they're having to do to juggle balls, I would much rather sell them those like amazing picks and shovels.
Yeah, I mean,
Even
that makes so much sense. Obviously, it's like being a broker is a pain in the ass. Like
Yeah.
it kind of sucks. But like I'm just thinking, 10, 15, 20 years in the future, how do you accrue the most value? You know what I mean? Like
here's what I would say. My answer might be different if any shipper was willing to give 100% of their freight to one broker. And yet the reality is like they're going to max out at 4 to 5%, maybe 10 tops. And because they're spreading that risk across, and therefore not putting all their eggs in one basket. And therefore, like, even if we captured every shipper in the market, would it be incredible business even at 4 to 5%? Yes. So like, I'm not going to completely laugh at that, but the total addressable market is not, you are capturing 100% of the market. You're capturing 4 to 5% at most. And if every brokerage out there feels like they need Genlogs to be competitive, then the expected financial outcome actually might be better for Genlogs than if you were a brokerage.
What? I just think to like what percent of the total kind of like human rideshare moves does Uber own? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they probably own double-digit percentage of that. Right.
Oh, for sure. Until Waymo starts to take it.
Right. So I guess I'm just
Ryan, have you taken a Waymo, by the way?
I have. Awesome experience.
I just took one for the first time. I've taken a cruise, but they shut down from GM. I've taken a cruise like 2 years ago, and that was like okay. It was like a little bit bumpy, but then I took the Waymo this past time and we went to San Francisco. I was like, wow, this is actually really calm, smooth, no issues. And I come from the Tesla FSD world, right?
I was just going to ask, like, what's your comparison there?
I would say that with Waymo, obviously there's no driver there, period, right? With Tesla FSD, I would say 1 out of every 5 trips I have to disengage. But in the rain, heavy rain, it's not that.
If I can ask, if 1 out of every 5 trips you're having to disengage, what does that mean for like the robo taxis then? Isn't that going to be the exact same tech, or is it just because it's
well, they have a new model that the rest of the consumers don't yet have. So like the latest version that I have, which I'm on the latest version, is 13.2.9. From what I read, the robotaxis are already on 14. So they have a completely rewritten stack, many more parameters. The model is much more capable. It's able to observe a lot more about the entire scene. So and so from what I understand, I mean, they're not making the most use of the computers that they have on board anyway. So I think they're going to become more and more capable. But the whole adverse weather, I'm not sure how that's going to end up looking like. But
now
back to the thing about like, yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, like we could take this in any direction, but I always am interested to hear your perspective. Like you, a former founder of an autonomous vehicle company, like sitting in a Waymo and kind of being like, wow, where was the state of technology like when you stopped with Autobahn, kind of compared to where Waymo is today? And what do you think that means with regards to the future of autonomous trucking? Yeah,
I think what Waymo is doing is much more similar to what you'll find in any autonomous trucking company. Like Aurora is there's Aurora and there's basically Kodiak, which are the more prominent ones that you might have heard about. And you'll find that those stacks are very similar. they'll go in and they will very heavily pre-map that very confined environment. Or like in self-driving trucks case, it's if they don't go and map a certain area, they don't know what to drive.
Mm-hmm.
That just becomes more or less a little bit problematic when you start to want to scale the business itself and start to incur more actual rideshare volume, because you're limited by what you map, and unless you map everything very accurately and all the time, it becomes problematic when there's a road closure, street closure, lane closure, and the vehicles might not be able to handle that. Now, in Waymo's defense, or any of these other companies' defense, right? Like AI is getting more capable, and they're teaching these models to handle those types of map differences per se, right? Mm-hmm. So back when I was working on Autobahn, those kind of dealing with those map differences was not a capability that was there, right? And so the primary concern, right, I think has taken as long as it has, because back then, which was I started the company in 2016, and back then everybody thought it was we'd be there in 5 years, and then 10 years later, or almost 10 years later, right? Like we do have Waymos on the street, but trucks are still not there either, right? So everybody thought it was going to be way sooner. I think that's usually always how it is. You have to kind of also paint a narrative that it's not going to take investors more than 10 years to, get a return on their investment per se. But a lot of those investors, also bought in. The investors at the end of the day have to put their money somewhere to work. So, but yeah, I definitely was off for sure in terms of how long it would take. But I think Aurora actually did do it as like a driver's delivery recently, but they had to retract because Texas didn't like it, I think, supposedly. Is that what happened? Do you guys remember that story?
Yeah, and it was at night, I thought too, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
It's very
given what the LiDAR can do at night yeah.
It is.
In some ways, I think the facts are pretty evident that even if you have to grab the wheel 1 out of 5 times in FSD, like on the whole, autonomous drivers might be safer than human drivers. But that's like a little bit easier to comprehend when it's like a 10,000-pound vehicle and not like an 80,000-pound fully loaded truck.
Yes, that's a very big difference, right?
Yeah.
We're at the point, by the way, where this is like weird, ironic phenomenon that I like realized has happened with me, is that now that I drive, I prefer to drive with it on FSD on all the time. And now that I do rely on it so much, when we went to San Francisco, we also rented a Tesla, but it didn't have FSD. And so I realized how bad of a driver I have become without it, just simply because I don't really pay attention, to those nuances anymore. And my fiance is like, anytime we're in the car, she's like, "Can you please turn it on?" So yeah. It's definitely become way better at responsiveness and whatnot. My mom uses it by default now too on her car, and it's way safer. I've also convinced my grandparents from going completely from one extreme of being like, no, like I want to live out the rest of my remaining years, to being full on considering how are they going to be able to charge an electric vehicle in their house, because they saw it as like, I might not be driving in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? But this thing can still kind of.
That's great. Like there's certainly positives. It's interesting what you said about you driving. This is actually something I've recognized recently. A lot of people on my team, and I'm sure almost everywhere, use these AI note takers. Yeah. But one thing I've actually learned is that 2-3 years ago, before these were ubiquitous, if someone on my team was in a meeting, a week later, I could ask them, "Hey, what did so-and-so say during this meeting?" Like, hey, what was discussed? And they would generally have an answer because they either had to remember it or they wrote it down. And there was some memory. Now it's a little frustrating because I'll ask my team, so like, "Hey, so what was the decision there? What's the next steps?" And they'll be like, "Oh, I'll have to check the notes." And it's like, once someone's note taking, completely detach and they're thinking about something else during those conclusions because they can go back and check later. So I'm legit worried about, like, on the one hand, AGI can supercharge what we can do as humans. And on the other hand, the skills and what we've had to learn and the practices and keeping your mind sharp over time, I'm worried, like, what does that mean for humans when we don't really have to think as much anymore?
It's going to destroy your brain. It has.
I mean, the neurons that are built in order to build out memory, right? They're not going to be used, right? But
it totally, people are just completely outsourced. And going further, it's not just remembering what somebody said a week ago. It's like literally outsourcing your thinking on everything, right?
Yeah.
I've completely fallen into that trap to the point where I'm just like, I don't want to make a decision without, chatting with an LLM about it, which I think, you might used properly might aid your decision making, but like it will totally atrophy your ability to just like think things through if you use it as a crutch. You know what I mean?
There's this other thought that I have to it, which is that while my brain may, for example, be forgetting how to, the memory aspect of it is potentially being lost by these note takers, similarly to Ryan, how you said with your team. I do think that, one of the things that we're working on, this is outside of even companies that, let's say, use note takers, right? Like even manually writing down notes, just the concept of information retrieval to begin with, right? If you think about it in the context of like that, all information actually does get streamed down into some kind of a database. There aren't that great of mechanisms right now that allow you to actually leverage like an external database as an extension of your memory per se. But I do think, and we're working on this as well internally too, which is that how do you make it very quick to get an answer, and not necessarily speaking rely on asking somebody to then go and do the query for you, then filter it and then get it kind of back to you, but just simply anybody in the company can go in and tap into this extended memory of that is now being basically kind of not being present in your brain per se. It's just being on an extra couple of hard drives, right? But how can you actually go in and converse with that in the same way that you would have otherwise, right? And it should probably be a natural language interface that's like seems the most intuitive. But have you guys try to look into anything like that?
I think we're a little bit early days on our side from like any product integration that does, we've had customer requests on, hey, I want to be able to make notes on a carrier and then basically later on have that inform what carrier you're recommending. Like, hey, this carrier was great. They did this. Hey, we had some issues. Okay, we pushed that down for them. We're not quite there yet. I'm super interested to see what OpenAI is going to come out with this, whatever hardware that Johnny Ive's building for them.
Sure.
And this, because I think that ultimately is where they're trying to go, is something that is 24/7 recording everything you are doing, seeing, hearing, and being able to bring it right back to you as like, hey, Christian, reminder, you said I need to call my grandma and it's now Saturday and you should probably do that. And not in a way that you ever had to text anything or put it into a notebook. So It'll be really fascinating to see how that goes.
Ryan, you don't wear glasses, do you? Or like you don't have contacts?
No, but if something was truly, I don't know. I tend to be like a weird forward deployed CEO that really hates tech. And yet, like, you show me something that truly like is helpful and doesn't look totally geeky to wear, and I'll take a look.
Yeah, I'll take a look. That's how I feel about it. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if I would want to do AirPods all the time, because sometimes they get uncomfortable after like 3 to 4 hours. And you have to make it as a one size fits all thing, but it never is. Everybody's ear is always different. And the alternatives like eyeglass, like glasses, or the other thing is the pen. What is it called? The
pendant. Yeah.
Pendant. Yeah. That hangs from your neck, which that one feels a little bit off. Like I'm not walking into a business meeting with that around my neck. I don't know about you.
I could see Reed doing it if it was like big gold chainy, So
Yeah.
Read my mind, man.
You have to accompany that chain with the G-Wagon read. That's the only way to roll up to the meeting.
Yeah, the G-Wagon. That's yeah, no, you're right. How much time do we have left here? 3 minutes?
Yeah, we're up here. So
what I have a very complete out of left field idea. Ryan, what do you, being from outside the industry, what is your just general impression of like how this industry like tends to think, like how like do you when you talk to people, do you see them thinking a lot about like how things are going to look in the future, or do you like what because to me, like I think we're so obsessed with how things are right now, and we basically like take right now as like a status quo that's like going to be the situation forever. And I'm just curious, and it makes sense because there's like so much crap you have to deal with in your day to day now that it's hard to really zoom out and be like, okay, is this how it should be? You know, like I'm just curious, like what's your impression, you know, of being in the industry for a couple of years, like how people like just it's a very weird question. I'm not really asking anything in particular, but like what's been your like experience dealing with this industry so far?
Well, I will say, Christian, could I share just one last thing? Because this will kind of be like my departing. I try to put down my thoughts on paper. And I recently wrote this article, which if you want to see what I think about the future of the industry, you go to Genlog's blog, and it's like the end of user interfaces. And it actually like it takes the Waymo concept and like transforms it into what I think how freight is going to be transacted in the future. This is what Genlogs is building for, kind of that future. What I would say is probably like 1 out of every 2 companies that I interact with, there is someone that is thinking in the future. The other company is unfortunately stuck in the present. But within the company that has someone thinking about the future, it is only normally 1 or 2 people in a company of 200 or so that is. And so there aren't enough people that are saying, what do we need to be building now, or investing in our tech stack, or changing to the way we're going to transact freight 2 years from now. It is very reactionary to a load was just stolen yesterday. What do I need to buy today? And so anyways, that's kind of my, in 30 seconds, I would say there's some people, not enough. And I do think those that are thinking about it are going to eat others' lunches here pretty soon.
We should have brought that end of user interfaces blog up way sooner in this conversation, because that I remember reading that, and there's a lot to talk about there, because I have opinions of my own from that perspective, but largely actually do, especially from where you guys are coming from, I totally see why you guys see it the way you do. But we have to bring that up on another.
We'll do it another time.
So I need to read this.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. A couple of things I disagree with, but like I think it overall makes sense. So
we'll talk about it another time.
Thanks so much.
Cool.
Reed.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, guys.
See you, Ryan.
Bye.